what do you see when you go out in the vineyard that has shatter?
Well, you can see all kinds of stuff, and I really don't use the term shatter. I mean, there's a lot of terms in wine and grapes that are sort of ambiguous, and the same term gets used for a lot of things. So I'll prefer to use the term pore set. Shatter is actually, according to plant physiologists, that's the stage where, I'll back up a little bit. You get bloom occurs, flowers are pollinized, some aren't. The plant can't and shouldn't set every single one of those flowers. There's way more flowers than that plant wants to have as grapes, or that there should be as grapes. So most of them fall off. Somehow the plant, through hormonal things, it chooses which ones are going to remain and which ones are going to fall off. Weather conditions can fool the plant into getting rid of most of them, or more of them than we want it to have. So then you'll end up with just a few berries, and a lot of people call that shatter. But the shatter stage is when flowers fall off. And so if you have a cluster that got shattered, people would say that it got shattered would mean that it has very few berries on it. Sometimes you'll have unevenness, and Zinfandel is famous for that no matter what. I think I've only seen one vintage where the Zinfandel was very even in its flowering and development, which was 1999. Every other vintage I've ever seen, it's a few, have had some degree of variability. But you can get clusters where there's a few berries that are really laggards, and they'll stand out at a certain point where they're bright green and everything else is purple. And at least in the red varieties, which I'll confine the discussion to because that's what we can see quite easily. There's others where you'll have entire clusters on the vine that are still green while others have turned color. You'll have some where the entire vines are behind adjacent vines. So you see all types of things. And there were a couple of vineyard blocks that I was working with that had all of the above, which makes it very difficult when you have clusters that did not set a huge crop. In other words, more than we would have liked of the berries or flowers had fallen off. So there's very few berries on clusters. And now we already have a low crop, and now we're supposed to go out there and remove more of it in order to elevate the quality of the wine we're going to have. And it's hard to go out there and do that, especially if that belongs to somebody else. And that's where it requires a very good relationship and cohesiveness of purpose and long-term view between the people who own the vineyard and the people who are making the wine from that vineyard. You have to know that you're in it for the long term. Otherwise, the grower's not going to like that. You're basically, it looks like you're taking money out of their pocket. And the winery gains the benefit of the quality rise. So this works in a situation where there's alignment between risk and reward. Estate operations, this is one of the places where there's a great plus to that, or there should be, because their goals are aligned. And by the opposite is like grapes growing on the spot market, where there's no long-term relationship. So you have both ends of that spectrum. Anyway, back to the situation where you have difficulty of bloom and unevenness. This is what separates, I think, the really, the long-term operations from those that are more short-term. They'll just throw their hands up and go with whatever they've got.